What up, Jet Team? Welcome to the channel. I've missed you. But if you haven't been here before, I'm a former F-15E combat fighter pilot, F-16 Thunderbird pilot, and I use that experience to break down epic aviation videos, stories, and subjects. And lately on Instagram, my inbox has been blown up with people asking about what's going on with the tensions with the US and China, and are we headed for World War III? So obviously, at the end of the day, the main goal is to avoid that and steer clear of that at all costs, but it is worth me pointing out China's key fighters and how they would compare to the United States. We're gonna put them head to head with their counterparts. We're gonna watch some actual flight videos.
Yes! Hell yeah! Hey, come on, baby! Come on! Yes! Come on! Ah!
But stay to the very end of this video.
I only pray you'll never leave me behind.
So I can give you my thoughts on the overall strategy, and we can kind of get in the minds of Chinese fighter pilots and potentially understand how to deter this situation and keep it from going south. So before we do that though, if you would, just dominate that like button and maybe even subscribe. Every time you do that, a fighter pilot somewhere gets their wings. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. So remember guys, I'm just some dude on YouTube, and I'm gonna be talking to you about my personal opinion and perspective as a former fighter pilot, current YouTuber. So keep that in mind. This is not from any official source, and obviously it's gonna be unclassified. I did spend a ton of my career researching, analyzing, debating, arguing, whatever you would like to say, on how the scenario would go if China invaded Taiwan and how the Taiwan Straits would be defended. Now that's pretty much all I can get into on that subject. The main focus of this video is going to be diving into the nuts and bolts of these Chinese jets and what you should do if you're ever in a situation where you need to dogfight them. And it's worth me noting, first of all, as a fighter pilot, what I like to do is I get in the mind of the enemy. I think about the person, the jet, the country, whoever it is I'm going to potentially fly and fight against, or even in training. If someone has a little tick that they do, maybe they turn the jet a certain way and I can take advantage of that. That's exactly what I would do when I was in combat. That's exactly what every fighter pilot in the West that I've seen has done. Now I'm sure it's done around the world, but for us in the West, we always think about the other cockpit, what's going on in that jet. What are they doing up there? Are they reading a magazine? They just hanging out? They doing loops to music? I wanna know. I wanna know what kind of jet that guy's flown before. I wanna know what he's gonna fly next. I wanna know how many children he has, what type of deodorant he uses, what's his shampoo like.
Wild Bill's hair tonic.
But seriously guys, it comes down to knowing what kind of quirks you might see when you're going head to head with someone in a dogfight or a long range engagement. And for me personally, I liked to think about China's overall philosophy. And if you look at China, the history of China, there's been a lot of dynasties in China, and they have the long range mentality. They think in 200-year increments. And a story I will share with you to highlight that is there was a dynasty who had won a major victory, an intense battle against another dynasty, and they were taking over power from that dynasty. What the emperor decided to do was burn the navy of China, the entire navy, because that navy had been created by the previous dynasty. And when questioned about it, obviously someone was like, excuse me, maybe we should just keep the navy and just change the logo? That emperor answered,
"We can rebuild the navy, but we must burn the memory of that prior dynasty forever."
Or something like that. It was along those lines. So that just shows and proves that China is thinking super long range. So will they invade Taiwan tomorrow? Potentially, but I don't know. I think more so they're thinking of a long game. They're thinking of a way to save face because they're a high context culture. They want to be seen relatively well on the world stage. They want to be an economic leader. So maybe how Russia invaded Ukraine, China doesn't want to necessarily repeat it the exact same way. They want to learn from that engagement and then apply maybe a more strategic long game scenario to Taiwan. And that's why they're very focused on naval operations, air interdiction out over the ocean. But I'll show you some graphics on that at the end. It's been me talking a lot. It's time to watch some jet footage. So to begin with, guys, we're gonna go with the J-10. The J-10 is kind of the workhorse of the Chinese Air Force. It's essentially a design element borrower from the F-16, and it's got canards, but if you look at this thing, you can essentially see that it has an F-16 flare. So with that said, let's go ahead and watch the video. Real nice lines on this jet. I mean, I love the Viper, I love the F-16, so seeing just the same similar contours and lines on this bad boy are cool. It's obviously got a delta wing. Now with a delta wing, guys, you get some downsides that I don't like. You bleed energy extremely fast, so that's the big thing that I don't like. If you look at this thing from the front on, you can see the canopy there. It looks like a D model on an F-16, and there's an F-16 put in this video just to remind us of the design elements and where it's coming from. Big thing with the F-16, unstable flight control systems. I'm sure they experienced that in the J-10. Now that is something that you can't see from a photo. You gotta be very intense with the flight control systems to make sure this thing can recover from stalls and things like that. This is a variant called the J-10B. They actually just introduced this somewhere around 2016, and it's got an aerial refueling capability there with the basket and the probe, as you can see. So that's a relatively new design. And now as we just look at the fuselage of this bad boy, I do like the way that the wings are integrated with the fuselage. Just really nice way for them to be tied in like that. You can see that's a smooth contoured line that just continues going up. You can see this kind of design on some of the modern jets, some of the modern private jets, where essentially the wings are below the fuselage, increases fuel efficiency, and just looks cool. And at the end of the day, look cool, sound good on the radio. You guys know my principles to fly in fighter jets. And the J-10C is the newest variant that's just come out within the last few years, and rumors are that bad boy has an ASA radar. When it comes to how many of these are in service, roughly 548. So is this a formidable matchup for the F-16? Well, I think this might be, out of all four that we're going to compare today, the closest competitor to its category. The J-10, it's a well-built jet from what I can see. It's essentially purpose-built, just like the F-16 is. Now, the downside of the J-10, in my opinion, is the delta wing and the canard design. I just really don't like that. Bleeds energy way too fast. You get one really strong move in a dogfight. So if this thing was dogfighting the F-16, it's gonna most likely shoot for a one circle fight, which means it's gonna try to just cash in as much energy as it can, kill all of its forward momentum, and point its nose at the F-16 for a shot. Where the F-16 is gonna want a two circle fight where it can raid around, pull 9 Gs at 420 knots and accelerate and get behind this thing. So there's gonna be two different schools of thoughts when it comes to a dogfight between these two. Ultimately, I think it's our closest matchup because the jets to me seem extremely similar for these fourth generation fighters. They've kind of got essentially the same characteristics for the most part, minus the delta wing variant. I do think it will come down as well to the pilots and what the proficiency is of the pilots flying these things if these two beasts were to meet. Moving on to the second Chinese jet. So the J-10 is the competitor with the F-16. Next up is the J-11, which is a competitor to the F-15. Now, the J-11 is a variant of the Su-27. It's a licensed variant where essentially China bought the license to build their own Su-27s. Now, recently, they have essentially just started putting Chinese parts in those jets as far as radar, all the different warning systems. They violated some contracts they had with Russia. At the end of the day, they're like, sorry, bro, thanks for the technology. Never saw that one coming, did we? So let's check out this J-11 and let's just see how this bad boy flies. And then after that, I'll tell you what I think about it going up against the F-15. So obviously the J-11, twin tail, twin engine, just like the F-15C, and there, seeing the Su-27 fly there. essentially the same airframe. Now, I like this airframe. I think it just looks classy. This video is going to show us some of the original variants, the original prototypes of that J11. This thing is definitely more focused. Who's this guy? It's like the original pilot to fly it, potentially. Yep, guy's looking angry that someone else is flying their jet. They're like, that was my jet, bro. But ultimately, this jet is just, it looks purpose-built, just like a Su-27, kind of like a workhorse. It looks like the front of it is massive. It's got a nice nose cone there to put a huge radar in it. So that's always a good thing. And the maneuverability of this, I like it a lot more than the Delta Wing J10 variant. So if you just look at it, it looks like a purpose-built jet. And as we look here into the cockpit, it's got a heads-up display, and the pilot's not wearing a JHEMX joint helmet mounted queuing system type helmet. So it shows me that this thing's gonna be limited when it comes to off-bore sight capability and things like that. The F-15C, to me, the big advantage that thing's gonna have is AIM-9X's having an HMD, being able to look off bore sight, but at the end of the day, you would never want to find yourself in a defensive position versus this J11, because it's going to have relatively decent capability when it comes to the air-to-air world. And another advantage that I think the F-15C would have over the J11 is integration. Integration is incredible in the F-15C. The way that it works and combines with other assets in the air-to-air regime is just incredible. I'm sure China's working on that, and that's one of their goals, is to bring their J11 up to an integration level that might be close and comparable to the F-15C. But due to that integration and the way that I've seen F-15C pilots just hone in and focus, I'm gonna give the nod to the F-15C. However, again, you don't want to find yourself in a position where the J11 is behind you, because I think at that point it would be a formidable enemy. Let's move on to the third jet, which is the J31 or the J35, which is the carrier variant, and it looks a lot like the F-35. I'm sure you didn't see that coming at all. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the video on this bad boy, and then I'll give you my thoughts. So here's that J35, guys. Again, it looks very similar to the F-35, and look, everybody's at the air show just hanging out, having fun. Why can't we just all do that? Let's just watch jets fly loops to music. We don't need to have these crazy tensions. Let's just hang out. It's a good time. Obviously, that's not the real world, so let's talk about this jet. That thing's got 2 engines, so the F-35 has 1. Ryan, why does this have 2? I'm glad you asked. Well, I think personally that the reliability of these engines is not up to speed with the reliability of the engines in the F-35, so I would put 2 in these as well, especially if you're gonna use them out over the ocean, where you might need to limp it home in case you lose an engine. So as you can see, decent takeoff profile here. The pilot's getting up to altitude, and then they're gonna pull it through the bottom. So they're just making sure that they have good clearance prior to making that pull down, which is called a split S. So look at all that black smoke coming out of the back of this bad boy. Now, obviously that's extremely bad for stealth characteristics. If an engine is doing this, to me, I think there's some work it needs to do on its stealth capability. Might be running at a temperature that's not ideal for stealth, but ultimately you also need to build a jet that can't be seen for miles. And when you have black smoke belching out of your aircraft, it's gonna be really easy to see. You can see that in B-52s in the US Air Force. Those bad boys, they highlight themselves whenever they change their power setting, because just like this, start to dump black coals onto the engine, and you can see it for miles around. So that's definitely gonna affect the lethality of this J35. It can do aileron rolls. Sign me up. I'll fly this thing all day long, baby. Let's do it. So there you go, guys. There's that video on the J31. Of note, the thing does have sawtooth engines, which helps some with its stealth characteristics. Obviously, that's exactly what the F-35 has as well. Now, whether or not those are actually helping with its stealth characteristics, that's up for debate, because again, you get a high resolution photo zoomed in on those F-35 engines, and the engineers are gonna be like, yeah, we can do that. We can make sawtooth nozzles, but whether they have the same materials, the same properties, that's gonna be the hard part. And something that I think is extremely interesting on this J35, Here's a high resolution photo of it. As you can see, the canopy opens the same direction as the F-35. Well, Ryan, why does the canopy open in that direction? Well, I'm glad you asked. So in the F-35, the canopy opens in that direction primarily because of the lift fan that sits right behind the pilot. Now, with all the linkages that come with a canopy, you wouldn't want all that stuff in the same place. That would just be an engineering nightmare. There's also some advantages to being able to access some of the side panels for stealth type technology that's in the front of that aircraft. However, China does not have a lift fan variant of the J-35, so they're doing what they've done with a lot of Western fighters. Again, imitation is the best form of flattery. Is they're like, well, let's just go ahead and make the canopy open that way, just in case there's some really awesome reason beside the lift fan that we need to do that for. So again, it just puts you in the mindset of what China is doing. Again, it's not a hit on them. China, don't worry, I'm still gonna invite you to my Christmas party. But at the end of the day, I love looking at what these different designers are thinking when they're building these jets. So if the J-35 were to meet the F-35 on a dark and stormy night, I think the F-35 has the advantage, primarily, maybe not due to what you think, but the F-35, guys, has an HMD, a helmet-mounted display, which is gonna show so much information. It's gonna create so much situational awareness. That's something that the J-35 doesn't have. That bad boy's got a traditional heads-up display, which to me, I remember transitioning from using just a heads-up display to using the JHMX, the Joint Helmet Mounted Cueing System, and it was like I had to unlock different parts of my brain to look in a 360 degree or 180 degree. I can look 360. Yeah, wait, you can't look 360? Come on, you need to try harder. But when you start looking all around you and you have information on your visor as you look around, it opens up whole new ways to fly fighter aircraft. So in my opinion, that's gonna give a huge advantage to the pilots in the F-35, not to mention the interoperability of that F-35, integrating with so many different things across the battlefield. The fourth and final jet that we are going to discuss today is gonna be the J-20 against the F-22. Let's dive into the video. There's that J-20. Again, it's a nice looking jet. You got the canards there, flexing, looking strong by the pool is what they were trying to do there. That's the official term. This thing is long. It's a big aircraft. Now, if you look at it, it looks like a YF-23. I mean, again, China's gonna take design elements from the West. We know that. That's not something that they try to hide. The YF-23 looks very similar to this, but they just threw some canards on there. And the Delta Wing is something that I'm not a huge fan of. But as you can tell, China does like the Delta Wing. This jet itself, guys, is made to be a missile truck going after big assets like an AWACS, a tanker, and obviously it would target fighters as well. But this thing's, it's a beast. It's got big legs. It's got the ability to get up high. Aerial refueling is a challenge. I don't think it's actually been added into this thing. So if you think overall of limitations that China has, aerial refueling will be one of those. Now, the downside of this bad boy is there's only 50. There's around 50 of them, but it can do aileron rolls, as we can see there. So as you know, I love loops to music, aileron rolls all day long. I'm kind of jealous of this pilot right now, if you can't tell. But yeah, ultimately, this thing's gonna go head to head with an F-22 most likely, and ultimately that F-22 is gonna eat its lunch in a dogfight, in my opinion, but long range, you don't wanna mess with this. Long range, beyond visual range, BVR, that's when this is gonna be a formidable enemy for sure. And there you can see that thing flying at night. I actually had a question on Instagram, do dogfights happen at night? They actually do, but ultimately you train to about 180 degrees of that turn prior to terminating, just because when you're pulling G and looking through night vision goggles, it's extremely challenging. Could it be done? Absolutely. But at night, you definitely want to prioritize going into a BVR, beyond visual range scenario, because a lot of times within visual range scenarios will be driven by an ROE, a rule of engagement, which says you have to see and identify that aircraft. Obviously at night vision goggles, you're not gonna be able to do that. So you're gonna have clearance to fire well before at night, most likely. But good question. So guys, you made it to the end of the video. Now you get the bonus. Does China want World War III with the United States? I don't know. Let's ask Nancy Pelosi. Nancy?
We will not allow China to isolate Taiwan.
But the answer, guys, I think is no. I don't think China wants World War III. Does that mean they're gonna not take a stab at trying to grab Taiwan when maybe they see the US as being vulnerable? No, it doesn't mean that at all. I just think ultimately, if you get into the mind of the Chinese, they think long term, and they're gonna be focused on a strategy that potentially blocks off Taiwan from essentially all resources. What that's called is a naval blockade, and they've actually started doing some exercises where they're launching missiles into points in the ocean around Taiwan, simulating they can destroy any boats coming in trying to drop off oil, food, any type of other war providing materials. They're basically saying, hey Taiwan, we can entirely surround you and wait you out because you're an island, bro. Which, if you think about the strategy there, that's been used before by the United States. If you think about the Cuban Missile Crisis, we created a naval blockade to essentially diffuse the situation. So could that be used to take an island? I mean, they could definitely try. And again, that would be a strategy that maybe someone playing the long game might use. And does China want to fight the United States? Absolutely not. I don't think they do at all. I think ultimately game recognizes game, and we understand that we're both world players. And again, I'm just some dude on YouTube, but you can see that China loves copying the tech of the United States. They love our fighter jets. They really look at our military and take notes from everything we do. So ultimately, yeah, do they want us gone? I don't think they want us gone. I think they want to be number one. They also still want to see the things we create and innovate, and they want to borrow those things and use them for their own military. Now, ultimately, I think they know World War III is bad for everybody. So ultimately, I don't think China wants World War III, but ultimately it's good to be informed and to stay ready for anything. That's how I would operate in any dogfight I was going into, any combat situation. I wanted to be prepared, and I wanted to know myself and know the enemy. Thanks so much for being here, guys. If you like this video, let me know in the comments below. Maybe even dominate that like button and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. You guys have helped me grow this channel a ton. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you on the next video.